Welcome back, everyone. So this is one of the few episodes that starts off in more of a unique way. Because where most episodes start by picking up where we last left off, this one falls more in line with episode 25, wherein we take a trip down memory lane to get some more insight into a specific character. In this case, Teru Mikami.
The average Japanese adult would say that Teru Mikami was a child with a strong sense of justice.
So Mikami's story begins with our narrator, the same one from episode 26, I believe, speaking to how, even from a young age, Mikami always had a strong sense of justice. Which, okay, we're laying down the groundwork that'll lead to us seeing why he eventually goes on to be chosen as the next Kira, seeing as we know that Light is all about justice. But that being said, plenty of people have a strong sense of justice. It's not really all that unique. So what else is it about Mikami that makes him so special?
Compared to the average Japanese person, Teru had been through and seen far worse miseries and even witnessed death.
So, okay, it looks like he's a character who's had his fair share of tragedy, which, if we're going solely off what we know so far from these two lines of dialogue, it almost seems like Mikami is a mix of both Light and Misa. Light in the sense that he has a strong sense of justice, and Misa in the sense that its life has been filled with misery and death. Because, let's not forget, Misa not only saw her parents die, but she was also almost killed herself by a crazy stalker. And all of this happened before she even received her death note. But to move away from the comparisons to our other two Kiras, I want to take note of how this scene is being framed. So it opens with this extended shot of a young Mikami standing rather stoically, I would say. He's also wearing a badge, one that acknowledges him as the class representative, which is important for context here. But basically we start off with a full body shot before slowly zooming in on his face, and then his eyes, and then a single eye which holds a reflection of some children who all appear to be staring right at him. Likely the children from his class, because again, he's the class representative. And while these kids staring at him shouldn't really be a big deal, the scene makes it feel disturbing and, towards the end, almost sinister. Like, after that last line from the narrator, the scene carries on, starting with the reflection of the children in his right eye before zooming in again to get a closer look of their faces. And like I said previously, it shouldn't really be a big deal or anything. I mean, they just look like goofy kids. But the lighting and the fact that the camera is shaking just makes it feel off-putting and tense. And this is further amplified when we switch our perspective on how we view these children. Because right now we're looking at a reflection. This image is how these children look to everyone who sees them. Or, I guess, how they look to almost everyone who sees them. Because for Mikami, they don't actually look like that. Instead, they look like this. Like, to keep it a buck, these look like some badass kids. And I want to drive home the fact that it's this POV that's now looking at the world so that he can decide who deserves to live and who deserves to die. Now, one could make the argument that he's seeing these children for who they really are, that he can see what's behind the mask. But one could also make the argument that he may have a warped perception of who people really are. But I suppose time will tell one way or the other. But for now...
Episode 32. Selection.
So, the episode proper starts off with a quick montage that showcases Mikami's morning. It starts with him getting up at 6 a.m. and shows us his morning routine up until he heads off to work via a bullet train. Now, on his way to work, we see him take note of these kids right here, who seem to be bullying this other kid. And apparently, he's feeling some kind of way about that. But as for now, it's not something he feels compelled to interfere with. Instead, he just keeps his thoughts to himself. And, well, let's actually listen in to what he's thinking right now.
In this world, there is only good and evil. Every human being, without exception, ends up falling into one category or the other.
So, right off the bat, we see that Mikami has a very black and white view of humanity. You're either good or you're evil. And while I feel like there are definitely issues with having such a staunch outlook when it comes to people, given how nuanced and complicated we all are, I can still kind of understand why he has this particular outlook. And I'll be able to better explain what I mean as we go along. So from here we travel back to the past, where we see little Mikami acting as the class representative in his elementary school. And he looks pretty happy up there, as he tells us that as the class representative, he tried his very best to do great things for his fellow students. But even with him having the best of intentions for everyone in the class, well, there's always going to be some assholes who want to ruin things. Which, in this case, comes in the form of these three, who Mikami refers to as the evil opposing his good. And he does have a point. I mean, the next thing we see is them ganging up on some other kid, knocking his things on the floor, grabbing him by his collar, putting their foot on his back. All the while, all the other students are just making their way out of the classroom. Well, almost all of them.
Evil has to be confronted.
And what I love about this scene is the fact that more often than not, you'd expect the protag, who in this scene would be Teru, to come in and kick some ass. Sorry, I've been watching a lot of old Bleach lately. But yeah, you'd expect him to come in and get shit done, but, no. He gets his ass kicked alongside this other kid, while everyone else just keeps staring from outside the classroom. Which, like, where's the teacher at? Like, I don't know about y'all, but at that age, I can't recall ever being in the classroom without a teacher present. Granted, that was a long time ago, but I remember that even if the teacher had to step out and go to the restroom or something, they'd call another teacher to watch the class while they were out. But I digress. After getting roughed up, we hear Mikami basically saying that despite the fact that he'd rarely beat the bullies, it was still always worth it for one reason.
Thank you, Teru.
He goes on to say that hearing the victims thank him empowered him to continue doing this over and over, despite getting his ass kicked pretty much every time. And that makes sense. Doing something that you feel is right and getting not necessarily praised, but having someone just acknowledge and thank you for it, it just feels good. It feels good to put good out into the world. And in Mikami's case, all the good he was doing did not go unnoticed, as he managed to get a dozen or so kids to actually stand up to the bullies and get them to stop, which is really cool. But also, it set a really dangerous precedent for little Mikami, as he came to basically see himself as an emissary for his own brand of justice. But more on that in a second. Now from there we actually head back to the present, where we see that Mikami has decided to go over to the boys on the train and get them to chill out. And I love the way he did it without saying a word, just put his hand on that kid's shoulder and his eyes said it all. I dig it. Now from there we fast forward a little bit and see Mikami in his office, and again we hear a voiceover wherein he says that while his efforts in elementary school proved beneficial for everyone, the same couldn't be said for his attempts in middle school. And boy is he right. Because as we head back to the past, we immediately see that these testosterone-filled little monsters are a lot more aggressive than the kids from before.
The more I confronted evil, the more enemies I had to face.
And this is part of what I was saying about his victories in elementary school setting a dangerous precedent for him. Because in seeing that his actions then were successful, it made him feel all the more emboldened to continue doing things that way. Even as he got older and the bullies went from simple shit like hair pulling to more aggressive forms of bullying, such as beating his ass, stripping him, and tying him up so that everyone can see him. And can someone tell me where the hell the teachers are at? Like, what is this, y'all? How were they left alone for so long that they had the opportunity to move all these desks, strip this boy, and tie him up like this? And hell, did they at least let my man keep his underwear on, or is everything displayed right now? I mean, damn. But moving away from the act itself, I wanted to point out something else Mikami said during this flashback, when he says that victims would eventually become participants, and that even those watching from the sidelines would also become influenced by evil and become enemies themselves. And it's here that we start to see how skewed Mikami's thoughts have become. Like, don't get me wrong, I can kind of understand the frustration he'd have with the people just watching, because really, it would be simple to just go get a teacher. That being said, he could have also done that before getting involved here. But regardless, when it comes to these kids not getting involved themselves, I could understand the hesitancy. Because clearly, seeing how Mikami ended up, getting involved could be, well, not great. But the thing is, calling them ops because they're staying out of it, that's a bit much. And when it comes to the first half of what he said about victims becoming participants, it's interesting because it's very obvious that this kid was essentially forced to participate here. And even after he did it, they still, Sparted him right on his ass. And the reason I'm wanting to bring attention to all of this is because here we see that Mikami's whole good and evil perspective on things ultimately vilifies those who don't actively fight against evil. And that's just not how that works. Or rather, it's a lot more nuanced than that. Like, what if someone can't fight back due to, I don't know, a disability, or even just extenuating circumstances, like the possibility of getting punished with a suspension or expulsion? Or what if they're just legitimately scared? You're telling me that people who are afraid to act just automatically become enemies? That line of thinking just doesn't make sense to me in situations like this one.
But for justice to triumph, it requires action.
Okay, I mean, sure, I don't necessarily disagree with this. In fact, it's kind of reminiscent of that Edmund Burke quote, "The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing." And I do believe in that sort of ideology, but I don't think it can easily be attributed to children in school because they're still growing and learning and just figuring things out. Just because you're brave enough and, quite honestly, stupid enough to throw yourself into the fray, it doesn't mean that everyone can or even should do that too. And something especially interesting about this also is the fact that by Mikami's own logic, Light would be one of these evil people. Because back in episode 1, Light saw this kid, Pseudo, bullying another student when he was in one of his night classes, and he didn't do shit. But okay, I'm getting a little too hung up on this. Let's go ahead and keep it moving.
So I realized to serve justice, I had to delete evil.
And okay, so at this point we have a better understanding of his philosophy regarding people. We know that he staunchly believes in good and evil. We understand what he considers to be good and that anything that goes against that or doesn't actively support it is basically automatically evil. And with this last line, we understand that in order to ensure that only the good elements of society remain, he must do what he can to delete all that is evil. Now, with this understanding, we continue this trip into Mikami's past as he explains to us how, through it all, he had a singular ally that supported him in his goal of deleting evil. His mother. Or rather, it used to be his mother.
Teru, not everything in the world is going to work the way you want it to.
So in this scene, we have what I would consider a good mom trying to impart onto her son a valuable lesson about how the world really works, as she goes on to tell him that he needs to stop throwing himself into these situations, that suffering like this is not going to have the impact that he thinks it will. And I think she's 100% correct here. And despite the fact that at one point she does refer to his actions as foolish, which isn't even wrong, really, I don't think that it comes from a malicious place. I think she's just genuinely concerned about her son's safety. I mean, I personally don't know what it's like to be the parent to a teenager yet, but I can't imagine my reaction would be all that different if my daughter was a teenager and she came home with bruises like this because she was trying to help someone else out, especially if this was happening frequently, which, going by what his mom is saying here, I'm fairly sure that it is. So yeah, I would be terrified. Like, baby, you gotta stop this. You're not gonna make them change by getting beat up. If anything, you may be making things worse by emboldening them to continue doing it, especially since the teachers aren't doing anything to stop them. Like, just no. But anyway, while I wholeheartedly agree with everything that she's saying here and think that it serves to prove how loving and caring a mother she is, Mikami doesn't agree.
My mother was wrong. She didn't side with justice. She was one of those who deserved to be deleted.
And I found that line incredibly interesting because, in a sorta weird way, I'm imagining his mom likely contributed to this too. And what I mean is, when he was younger, I'm sure he would tell his mom what he was doing, how he would stand up to the bullies, and how the kids he saved would thank him. And given the fact that I do believe that she's a good mother, and because back then he wasn't coming home with torn shirts, broken glasses, and bruises on his face, she likely told him that she was proud of him for standing up for his friends at school. Like, I imagine if my baby girl came home from school in the 3rd grade and was like, "Dad, these girls were being mean to my friend and I got them to leave her alone," then I would tell her how proud I was of her. And so, if we follow that train of thought and believe that his mother was consistently praising her then much younger son for standing up for his friends, then I could see how Mikami might have conflated the idea that his mom was proud of him with the idea that his mom was a believer in his brand of justice. So now, as a teenager, when he hears his mom say this, he feels betrayed. Because while he was thinking that she believed in what he was doing, he's discovering that, in reality, she only really cared about him and what was making him happy. And now that what's making him happy is also actively hurting him in very real ways, she's like, fuck all of that. And in response, Mikami's like, well, fuck you then. Like, it's all very complex and so very, very interesting to me. Especially now that I am a parent. Like, I never considered the fact that overly praising something could potentially reinforce certain behaviors that may seem good as a young child, but could possibly lead to self-destructive behaviors as a teenager or as an adult. And y'all say that Death Note fell off in the second half. I just learned a parenting lesson from this shit. Now, that being said, Mikami is a bit of an extreme case. Especially with the fact that he claimed that his own mother ought to be deleted, and the fact that his next lines are,
"That was when the miracle happened."
And when Mikami says the miracle, what he's referring to is the fact that 4 of the worst kids at his school got into a traffic accident and all died, taking 1 bystander with them. Oh, and by the way,
that bystander was my mother.
Yeah. Where do I even begin with this shit? Now, I will point out that at his mother's funeral, we do see him crying, so that's something. However, from his own internal monologue, he states that he was terrified after it happened. So the tears might stem from that more so than, like, sadness. And when it comes to him being terrified, I definitely get it. Like, he wished for all of them to be deleted, and then, lo and behold, it happened. That's like a crazy coincidence, really. But moving on with his internal monologue, he actually doesn't reference his mother again after this. Instead, he focuses on the 4 students who died and how their deaths would ultimately serve to make things better for everyone in their classroom. And the messed up part about it is, he was right.
Our classroom became a peaceful, joyful place.
And really, all this did was serve to reinforce Mikami's stance on the idea that bad people deserve to be deleted. And I can't even really blame him for doubling down on it because, I mean, following their deaths, everyone was just happier. Now, moving on from this, we jump ahead a bit as we see Mikami in what I imagine is law school, as he explains that his penchant for justice naturally evolved into a desire to become a lawyer. Which makes sense, same way it makes sense that Light would want to become a cop. Law and order and justice and whatnot. But there is something Mikami says that I thought was really weird and worth pointing out real quick.
Every time I judge someone as evil, they would soon be taken care of.
And he wonders to himself whether it's all coincidence or if he's somehow special. And the reason I thought it was weird was because the deaths that he's referring to here aren't deaths that had been brought about by Kira. And the reason I feel fairly confident of that is because he says this line before mentioning law school, meaning that this is way before Kira. But getting back to what he said, it's weird because what's being implied here is that the thing that happened with those students and his mother just kept happening to people that he deemed as evil, essentially meaning that the people he felt were evil would sooner or later wind up dead. And from this little montage here, we're talking about at least 8 other people in addition to his classmates and his mom. I mean, it happening one time is crazy enough, but multiple times throughout the years? That's kinda wild. But also, just before we move on, I wanted to point out this shot right here, because I imagine it's meant to sort of draw parallels between Mikami and Light, as we saw an almost identical shot of Light during the first episode. And I thought that was kinda cool. But okay, from there we fast forward a few years? Long enough for him to have finished law school and to have started working as a lawyer, it seems. But here's where he's introduced to Kira for the very first time, via some newspaper articles. And funnily enough, he ends up attributing all those previous deaths to Kira.
Everything that had been happening around me wasn't coincidence. It was divine justice.
And I found that so interesting because he's crediting Kira for shit that he didn't even do. Like, all of those previous deaths were just coincidence. And yet, with Mikami tying them directly to Kira, it ultimately serves to bolster his connection to Kira immediately. Because at this point, he's under the impression that the two of them are, I don't know, like kindred spirits? That Kira saw the evil in those same people that Mikami thought were evil, and that he went ahead and took care of them in secret. And now, or in 2007 when he read these articles, he figured that Kira had now made the decision to do even more with his power, and kill even more evil people. But okay, this moment is also important because it shows us that Mikami has been firmly planted on Kira's dick since day one, even going as far as to think himself to be special, claiming,
God had been watching me.
Okay, buddy. Well, you know what? Actually, I mean, he's wrong, but he's also not wrong, because, like, who has the notebook now, you know? Kira may not have been watching him then, but he sure did eventually. But from there, he pretty much just goes on to say that he made a point to frequent places where he knew God would be watching. And in doing that, well, eventually, it happened.
God recognized me. He found me worthy of sharing his power to eliminate evil.
And that's gotta be such a crazy moment for him. But yeah, from there we make our way back to the present. Or, I guess it's worth pointing out that while we were peering into Mikami's past, it was intercut with a few transitions to his present. And I want to point that out because I believe it's meant to show us that Mikami has a sort of schedule that he tends to keep to, which will be important later on. But when we do catch up to the present, we see Mikami back in his home office, maybe? I'm guessing that's what this place is. And as he sits here writing names while repeating his personal mantra of
delete, delete,
we see Ryuk just hanging out behind him. And yeah, that's it for Mikami's backstory. And I feel like, while it is definitely a different approach to introducing a character, I dig it a lot. But yeah, with all of that being said, let's jump back into how to use it. First up, if a death note is owned in the human world against the god of death's will, that god of death is permitted to stay in the human world in order to retrieve it. So pretty self-explanatory, right? I guess if we wanted to extrapolate something more out of it, we could say that this implies that Shinigami are not typically able to come to the human world whenever they want. Honestly, I was more so under the impression that they just didn't care about the human world enough to bother making the trip. But perhaps it's more so that they can't go unless they're down there for a specific reason, such as finding and retrieving their notebook. Though, that does beg the question, how would your notebook end up in the human world if you're not allowed to go there? Like, I get that in Ryuk's case, he must have thrown it through a portal to get it there, but what about Rem? She took her notebook to Misa directly, according to her. Would she even have been allowed to fly down there to do that in the first place? Maybe I'm just overthinking it. Anyway, next up, in that case, if there are other death notes in the human world, the gods of death are not allowed to reveal to humans that death note's owner or its location. Oh, so here we get a legitimate answer to the question that Light posed back in, what was that, episode 13? Yeah, when he said,
"Does that mean that if this fake Kira Shinigami were to see you, there's a chance he might reveal that I'm Kira?"
well, going by this rule, Rim couldn't say anything, even if she wanted to. Because if she did, then, well, I'm not entirely sure what would happen. I mean, we never really got to see the situation play out because Misa figured out how to find Light on her own. But that being said, Rim and Ryuk had to have been in this little cafe spot with Misa and Light. Like, I know they don't appear in the scene, but at this point in the story, Ryuk was still following Light around 24/7. And when Misa was the owner of that notebook that Rim gave to her, we never saw Rim on her own. So I have to imagine that they both just kept their mouths shut because they apparently had to. Anyway, things pick back up with Light mulling over the final moments of the previous episode, stating that he understands why Mikami killed Demigawa, but even still,
"Now there's no spokesperson. Kira needs a voice."
Which is funny because, meanwhile, elsewhere in Japan, we see that Mikami is having pretty much the same thought himself.
We need a spokesperson to spread his word to the people.
It's actually kind of wild just how much their thoughts align. But I guess that goes to show that Mikami really was the best person for the job. Now from there, Mikami goes on to say that because he's yet to hear from Kira, likely because he's in a situation where he can't move freely, he's just gonna go ahead and take the initiative to pick a new spokesperson himself. And from there we skip forward a few days where we finally get to see who the new spokesperson is.
This is Kiyomi Takada from News 6.
Now, most of you probably recognize who this woman is, but for those of you who don't, given we haven't seen her since episode 15, Kiyomi Takada is the girl, well, one of the girls that Light was dating in college as a way to sort of make his dating Misa seem less suspicious. At the time, she wasn't really all that important to the story, with her only appearing in, I think, just 2 scenes. One in episode 14 when they were talking in class, and then again in episode 15 when they were walking through the campus together. And that's it. But she's back now, and she's ready to be a lot more involved with the plot as we head into these final episodes. I mean, hell, she's essentially the new Demigawa. But to get back to the current episode, Light obviously immediately recognizes her, but he's not the only one.
"There's no mistaking it. That's the girl that Light dated in university."
And the reason Mogi knows that is because he was the one tailing Light back then. Now, Mogi's quick to share this information with the class, which at first has Light a little concerned. But then, after thinking about it for a second, he realizes that it could actually work out in his favor. I mean, he'd have never chosen her himself because he knows her. So, if anything, it could help alleviate some suspicion given the fact that they know he's not stupid enough to pick an ex-girlfriend to be his spokesperson. Now, before we go any further with the task force, we head back over to Mikami, as he goes ahead and explains why he chose Takada.
She clearly supports Kira. She thinks like Kira. That makes her the broadcaster most worthy of being the new voice of Kira.
And it's interesting to think that Mikami has had several encounters with Light's ex-girlfriend, who also happens to be a Kira supporter. He speaks of how she led a few debates that he was a part of, how he noticed that her tone seemed to change whenever Kira was brought up. Hell, it even looks like he took her out to dinner a couple times. Now, one more thing before we make our way back to the task force. At one point, they show a clip of Takada reporting something on the news, and according to the subtitles, she's apparently talking about Hurricane Katrina, which is really weird because it's 2012 in this universe, and Hurricane Katrina happened in 2005. But okay, moving on. So back at Task Force headquarters, Light tells the team that they might be able to use Takada to their advantage, as he mentions the fact that the two of them used to date in college. He goes on to say that, given how thirsty she was back then, he'll be able to slide into her DMs and convince her to meet up with him. And this would ultimately be beneficial for the task force because they're assuming that since she's Kira's spokesperson, she must be in contact with him. And hopefully they can get to him through her, which is a solid plan. I mean, it'd be a little more solid if they weren't sending in their main suspect to talk to her, but, I mean, no one else has a pre-existing relationship with her, so what can you do? Anyway, Light goes ahead and tells them that getting her to meet up with him isn't going to be a problem. However, what is going to be an issue is trying to get her to betray Kira, because according to him,
she worships Kira.
But he goes on to say that there may still be a way to sway her into cooperating, stating that the police have maintained a certain level of neutrality when it comes to Kira, neither condoning nor condemning his actions. So, since Light is a police officer, he intends on approaching her under the guise of being a Kira supporter himself, one who's more than happy to lend his support to Kira in any way possible, which at first glance seems like a smart play, until you remember the fact that Kira should know the identity of every person on the task force. And that's even more undeniable now that Ryuk is gone, because where else could he have gone besides back to Kira? And y'all know for a fact that he knows each and every one of your names. And so, since we know that Kira knows all of their identities, then the moment Takada mentions that someone from the NPA reached out to join the cause, because she would definitely need to mention to Kira that she had a private meeting with a police officer, and Kira responds by asking who this police officer is, because obviously he's gonna ask who it is, and when she responds by saying that it's Detective Light Yagami, son of the former director, the dude who Kira personally spoke to a few weeks ago, I mean, come on now. There's no way he's gonna allow you to keep talking to her. Hell, he may very well kill you at that point. Like, it was one thing sending and letting them keep the notebook, or notebooks as far as Kira should know, but now y'all are trying to manipulate his spokesperson? Get the fuck out of here with that. Best case scenario, he tells you to bugger off. Worst case, you are dead. So yeah, this whole idea is just a little silly to me. But for whatever reason, they're working under the assumption that either Takada won't tell Kira his name, or that Kira somehow just doesn't know who he is. Okay. Anyway, Light gets the go-ahead from the members of the task force and says that he'll hit Takada up tonight. But Aizawa's like, hold up real quick, buddy. There's no way in hell I'm letting you talk to this woman alone. Which, fair and smart. Now, in response to that, Light's just super agreeable again, which I don't actually have a problem with this time, because as Light points out, from an investigative standpoint, it does make sense to have someone listen into the conversation in case she drops some sort of hint and Light misses it or something. Now from there we head over to NHN to check in with Takada just as Light calls her. But before we get into the conversation, I just wanted to point out the level of security that they have for the building. Like, there are 4 men, agents it looks like, guarding the front entrance. And on top of that, Takada personally has at least 1 agent standing outside the door to her office. And I get why this is probably necessary, because for as many supporters as Kira has, he also has his detractors. And with Takada acting as his spokesperson, I mean, it makes sense that she'd be thoroughly protected at all times. But okay, let's get into the conversation itself.
Kiyomi? This is Light Yagami.
Light?
Bruh, what is it about this man that gets women weak in the knees? Like, my man just said, hey, and she's already blushing. But anyway, he goes on and asks her if she'd be able to meet up. But of course, he's coy about it, telling her that he knows it might not be possible given how busy she must be these days as Kira's new spokesperson. And I actually really love her response to him.
Don't play innocent and humble with me, Light.
You wouldn't have called if you didn't think it was possible to see me.
Like, she may want him, but she's not falling for this whole modest act that he's trying to pull on her. And since she's made it clear that she's not, Light goes ahead and switches his game up on her.
I wanted to talk to you again, but I never had the chance. And now it looks like our jobs have brought us together. Call me crazy, but I feel like this is fate.
This dude loves using that line about fate, doesn't he?
I can't help but think that it must be fate that I met you today.
Now, one more thing before we switch scenes. I want to point out the fact that Aizawa is just standing in the background here. Which, like, aren't you supposed to be listening in to the conversation? Shouldn't you be using the setup y'all have to tap the line so that you can actually listen in? Like, what's the point of you standing there? You can't possibly know what she's saying on the other line. Also, is it not weird to you that he's suddenly whispering into the phone? Is that not even remotely a red flag or something? I don't know, it just seems like there's really no reason for him to be here right now. He's only getting half the conversation, and even when Light is acting weird, he's not even acknowledging it. Oh, also, listening to this should be really weird for Aizawa, right? Like, he was there when Light and Ryuzaki had that whole conversation about Ryuzaki wanting him to manipulate Misa to get information on the second Kira. He was there when Light deadass said,
I can't manipulate a woman's feelings like that. To me, exploiting another person's feelings for personal gain is unforgivable.
Like, what? Where's that guy at? I mean, I guess you could argue that 5 years will change a person, but that boy straight up said it was unforgivable and that he would never stoop that low. So much for that, I guess. But whatever, I digress. Let's go ahead and check back in with Misa and Mogi. Or Mochi.
Mochi, your cooking is really good, and I appreciate that you're doing everything for me, but it's been 5 days now.
Oh shit, not Chef Boyar Mochi. Those look like some delicacies too. I see you, Mochi. But the conversation here isn't really too important. I mean, it is kind of funny because Misa's worried that Light might actually think she's cheating with Mogi and that he'll be so jealous. Which, I don't think you gotta worry about that, Misa. But yeah, we're really only checking in on them so that we can see that apparently Mello is listening into their conversation because he stuck a listening device under her dining chair. Which, when did he do this? Why did he do this? Does he know about Light and Misa?
Nier and the others told me that this woman's supposed to be the second Kira.
Wait, I'm sorry, what?
Nier and the others told me that this woman's supposed to be the second Kira.
Nier and the others told you what, when? When did that happen? When did Nier even find that out? What the This is getting to be a bit ridiculous. Like, don't get me wrong, it's not a huge leap to jump to Misa being the second Kira once you know that Light is the original Kira. I mean, the fact that they both disappeared from the public eye for about 2 months at around the same time would be enough on its own to suspect her. But we couldn't have even had Nier mention it, like, at all? And furthermore, are we saying that Nier called Mello to tell him this? Or was it Lidner, Giovanni, Rester? Who told him? And when did they tell him? Because Nier only found out about Light 6 days ago. And we know that because Misa says that Mogi has only been here for 5 days, meaning that that's when he and Aizawa conducted their search. And we know that Aizawa had talked to Nier the night before that. So it looks like Nier and the SPK just called Mello right after they figured it out themselves. Which then led to Mello sneaking into Light and Misa's apartment and planting this device sometime within the last 5 days. Which, is Mello sharing this information with the SPK now too, or okay, whatever. What else does Mello have to say here?
Could it really be this unbelievably stupid girl?
Oh, that's it? He just says that and we're done with him. Yeah, no, okay, that's fine. So from there we head back over to Light and Aizawa as they make their way to the hotel room to get the cameras and wiretap set up. And while they're walking to the room, they overhear Takada on the news, spreading Kira's gospel, claiming that Kira will never forgive those who are a threat to justice. But, in addition to that,
he will also not forgive those who live wastefully and refuse to use their abilities to contribute to the betterment of society.
Which is not a surprise, really. Like, honestly, once Kira's gotten rid of all the big criminals, which, according to the president, he's pretty much already done, it's not like he's just gonna stop there, you know? It's not like, oh well, all the bad people are gone, let me put my pen down forevermore. No, that's not how that works. If Kira lets up, then the whole system falls apart. He needs to be essentially omnipresent forever. And if all the big criminals are gone, then, I mean, somebody's gotta die so that people know that Kira's still there. And in this case, according to Mikami, the focus will be geared towards people who live wastefully and refuse to use their abilities to contribute to the betterment of society. And I do want to point out that in the show, this is interpreted as Takada saying that Kira's gonna kill lazy people.
What?
So Kira's gonna kill lazy people now?
But I feel like that's an oversimplification that doesn't quite capture the essence of what she's saying. Because from my POV, her words don't come across as her saying that Kira's gonna kill lazy people, because living wastefully and not using one's abilities to contribute to the betterment of society doesn't necessarily mean that you're lazy. In fact, it doesn't really mean anything without a clear understanding of how those words are being defined. Because really, what does it mean? What constitutes living wastefully? Is it living wastefully if you buy too many groceries and let half of them expire in the fridge? Is it tossing out stuff that you could have donated? Is it spending money on things you don't need just because you wanted to? And maybe you think these examples are silly or ridiculous, but the fact of the matter is, you don't know. Because depending on who you ask, those could all be considered living wastefully, and according to Kira's current spokesperson, Kira's not going to tolerate that. And then, when it comes to not using one's abilities to contribute to the betterment of society, what does that mean? Are we talking mandatory community service hours? Are you only contributing if you work in medicine, education, or customer support? And what about people who have jobs that don't seem like they necessarily benefit society? I mean, take me, for example. Okay, maybe not me exactly, because I work in fraud prevention at my 9-to-5, but say this was my full-time gig, making videos about cool anime shit. Is this considered using my abilities to contribute towards the betterment of society? Or would Kira just write me off too? Get it? Write me off? Like, literally? Sorry, my point is, Takada saying that just opens the door for everyone to become fair game, regardless of whether or not they're a criminal. And just to be clear, everyone was always fair game, but now it just seems like Kira's being more transparent about it. But anyway, rant over, let's hear what Light has to say after hearing this.
You're taking this too far, Mikami. It's too early to be making those kinds of statements.
See what I mean? Too early. This was always a part of the plan. Light understands the fact that Kira only works as long as he's relevant, and in order to stay relevant, he'd eventually have to start killing people over minor shit. Now, moving on from that, we fast forward a bit, past the news broadcast and up to the point that Takada makes it to the hotel room, and okay, I may talk a lot of shit on Light for a lot of different reasons, but I will say, dude is unmatched in terms of swagger. Because this moment where Takada walks into the hotel room to find Light just standing there in this crisp looking suit with his hands in his pockets and Tokyo Tower lit up in the background, coupled with the fact that he doesn't say anything for at least 12 seconds. He just stands there, just letting her bask in the aura that's radiating off of him from across the room. And the tension, oh my goodness, the sexual tension is palpable, y'all. And then, in order to just really seal the deal, after the 12 or so seconds of them just staring at each other passes, Light ends up saying,
I missed you.
And y'all, the way he let the words just hang in the air for a couple seconds, whew, I damn near swooned over him myself. But yeah, from there they sit down and chat for a couple minutes until suddenly...
Kira. Is it Mikami?
Who else would it be, Light? If it isn't Mikami, you have a much bigger problem to contend with, because that would mean that there's a fifth? Yeah, a fifth Kira out there. But okay, Light suggests that she answer it, seeing as it's Kira calling. Definitely don't want to screen his calls. And so she does, and the two of them have a quick conversation wherein Takada says that she's not alone, and Mikami asks her who she's with, and she tells him that an old friend of hers reached out and wanted to meet, which immediately interests Mikami enough to ask to speak to him. And, well...
She's passed the phone to Light.
It could be dangerous if he's the real thing.
Yeah, it definitely would be. Because the moment Light says, my name is Light Yagami, he could very well end up dead. The only thing that would ensure that that doesn't happen is if, for whatever reason, Kira just doesn't ask him who he is.
Who am I speaking to?
5 pages on November 26th? What do you mean? Your god!
Now, okay, obviously Mikami did have the wherewithal to ask Light who he is, and obviously Light was never going to give him that information over the phone. But when it comes to the task force, is it not weird that Kira didn't immediately ask for his name? Again, I know that he did, but from their perspective, Kira just randomly mentioned pages of the notebook on a specific date. Like, what the hell? The Death Note isn't even common knowledge to people, and he just mentions pages to someone he doesn't even know? It's all just very strange. And I get why Light had to do it that way. He didn't have a lot of time, and he needs Mikami to understand that he's the OG Kira. But from the outside looking in, it's just a little weird. Just like it's weird that after the two of them go back and forth for a minute, with Mikami asking yes or no questions in regard to Kira's current status when it comes to being under surveillance and not being able to move freely, this happens.
But how can I trust you're the real Kira? Turn to Sakura TV! Sakura TV?
And the reason I say it's weird is because why is Kira proving that he's Kira to a random person who, again, he doesn't even know? Like, what? All he knows about the person he's talking to is that they're an old friend of Takada's. Is this just something that you do for all her friends to prove you are who you say you are? But whatever. Once they turn on Sakura TV, this happens.
He died!
So what's crazy about this is that someone, or several people, actually decided to go back up on that same stage where these 5 dudes died, about a week ago? Like, there's no way I'd do something as stupid as that. But yeah, Mikami killed that dude, and given the fact that it's now confirmed that Light is talking to the real Kira, he uses it as the perfect opportunity to dart over to a notepad in the hotel room and write, Kira wants the room checked for devices. I'm removing them before he sees them. Which, I mean, yeah, there's nothing to really be done at that point. Sure, the task force may not trust Light all that much, but they can't have him risk his life over a feeling that they have about him possibly being Kira. So they gotta let him do it. Now, that being said, the fact that Kira would give Light enough time to remove the bugs before sending someone in seems a little far-fetched. If Kira said that he wants the room checked for bugs, he's not going to give you 5 to 10 minutes to potentially remove them before sending someone in. Also, even if you did remove them, where are you going to put them so that they're not found? Whoever's coming in here to check would obviously check every part of the room, and thus they would find wherever you stashed them. But whatever, maybe I'm being too nitpicky. Anyway, with all the wiretaps and cameras disconnected, Light and Takada can speak freely, which is why Light comes right out and says,
I am the real Kira.
Light is Kira?
Luckily for him, she didn't say that part out loud, otherwise Mikami might have heard it. And speaking of Mikami, Light goes ahead and pivots back to him, telling him that he won't allow him to ask Takada who he is, which fair and understandable. And also, not something that Mikami really cares about all that much. Would he like to meet Kira? Sure. But at the end of the day, he's just happy he gets the chance to work with him. And better yet, hear his voice, which is why he agrees and ends the call. Now from there we focus back on Takada, who's honestly just as elated as Mikami was. She then goes on to tell Light that he was the only man that she ever admired and felt a strong connection with. So to find out that he's Kira, well...
It's incredible.
And yeah, with everything going according to Keikaku, yet again, he approaches Takada and tells her exactly what she wants to hear.
Join me, Kiyomi. You will be the goddess of the new world.
And you really do get the idea that he would definitely prefer to be with her instead of Misa. Like, he gets all of the adoration and worshipping while also getting to deal with someone who's more of his equal in regards to intelligence. And that's not to say that Misa is stupid, because she's not at all, but she's more clever and cunning than outright intelligent, whereas Takada is much more intelligent in the same way that Light is. Also, I mean, from Light's perspective, Takada's just not as annoying with her thirstiness as Misa is. But that's pretty much it for this episode. After this, Light calls the task force and lets them know that he's, 1, safe after the whole ordeal, which, I mean, he shouldn't be, but whatever, and 2, he's gonna continue dating Takada to see if he can't get any more information out of her. And then, immediately after that, we have the final scene of the episode, wherein we see Mikami gleefully writing down names while, again, muttering his catchphrase to himself.
Delete, delete.
And as he does that, we see a rather demonic-looking Ryu turn to the camera and walk towards it, leaving Mikami behind to do his thing. And yeah, roll credits. Anyway, that's the end of this video, but before we go, I just want to give a shout out to all the folks over on our Patreon. I want to thank all of our admirable assessors, our invaluable investigators, as well as our remarkable researchers, like Arrow Falcon Green, Game and Alchemist, Gary Huang, Jorge Ochoa Reyes, Legend Dragon, Mitch Corcoran, Pellets, Staff of the Crystal Serpents, The Best, Trinity Schiffer, Tyrant Link, Vanellian, and Yggdrasil. And lastly, a special shout out to our official overanalyzers. Thank you Archangel89, Asia, Birdbath Keeper, Bob Van K, Cavarax XE, Chicken Wugget, Cody for Now, Seamard, Croy Raiden, Emilia, Psychedelic Palimpsest, I Am the Blonde Asshole, Jack Witt, Joey Helbig, Josh Thompson, and Matt J. Dave. I just want to say thanks again to all of y'all for helping make these videos possible. But yeah, if you liked this video, then consider dropping a like. If you really liked it, then consider subscribing. And if you just loved it and want to support the channel, then consider joining the Patreon. Anyway, that's it for this time. Until next time, friends, peace.